Hello there, this is Cridical from Critical Media, just taking a look at the Superman Earth 1 series from J. Michael Straczynski, Shane Davis, Barbara Ciardo on the colors, and Ardian Syaf joining in on the third volume. And what we usually do with this channel is give you an idea of what to expect whenever you come across these books in the wild. So we'll go over the exteriors, some bonus material, art and plot points, and then a brief review at the end. But regarding the bonus material, we are going to skip it because, admittedly, there's really not much going on in that regard this time. But anywho, for those of you who may not be aware of the Earth 1 series, essentially it was when DC was trying to bring these characters into a more real-world atmosphere. So, more so real-world repercussions to their actions. So, it tends to be essentially more believable than most. Now, these are available in trades as well, but unlike the Batman and Wonder Woman series, where you can actually buy a trade with all three, they have yet to do that with Superman. So, in this case, you're seeing the debut copies, the hardcovers here, from 2010, 2012, and 2015, technically. It was printed in 2014. And in that respect, they all have very consistent covers. One thing I noticed that's unique about the Superman titles, now, the one thing that is familiar is the grid-based patterning, at least on the black section, the spines, which are pretty much the same. But what makes the Superman ones more unique is that the embossed areas are far more detailed than the others. So there's a lot going on in that respect. There's volume 2, probably the one with the most prominent embossing here. It's pretty detailed there. And pretty on point cover as well. And yeah, third volume, interestingly enough, it's just his uniform that has it, or should I say just the S. But very unique in that respect too. Now, in terms of at least back to volume 1 here, let's bring that puppy back up here. Now, this was the introductory piece to the series. So, JMS, he was trying to go for, something that will captivate people. So it is very action heavy, like very blockbuster-esque, very perfect for Superman. But it does start off with, your coming to the big city story, the outsider looking on in. At least that's the motif it constantly uses. And yeah, I just appreciate Shane Davis's interpretation where they have a very much more, a far grittier aspect. It's going for that veracity of the real world. So I appreciate, the, wardrobe, the anatomies, but even the lighting. And the series itself, it has a very cinematic quality throughout, so it's very sequential in its paneling. You'll rarely get, inner thought bubbles. It's often a character in the moment speaking these lines to you. But yeah, just as a summary, you're kind of learning here as you flip through the pages, he tries out for a football team, they want him, shows up at a research facility, solves a 10-year formula in seconds. The world's his oyster, essentially, but for him, it's all about taking care of his mother. He doesn't care what job it is as long as he can take care of his mother. So he's not really having a global perspective on things. But there was always a preparation for it. But yeah, as you go through it, one thing I definitely appreciate is a lot of the imagery and even the kind of sequences they create. Because yeah, he's right there, very candid, saying, I can't do it. I can't be the man you want me to be, Dad. So it has that kind of emotional content attached. They do set up this character here, Major Sandra Lee, as the, the antagonist originally. Just researching any sort of paranormal activity on Earth. But, I guess that goes a little too detailed in that respect. The one thing I do appreciate is he could get almost any job, but the one place that turns him down is the Daily Planet, which I always appreciated. So naturally, the only place to turn him down makes sense that it somehow intrigues him, right? But I will mention, the way they depicted Lois Lane in this series, I can't help but think they were intentionally drawing her this way to try and lure Jennifer Carpenter, that actor, to play her. She, personally, in my opinion, would have been a perfect knockout. But hey, we got Amy Adams. That's still good in its own way. But anywho, as I mentioned, the story, it's really going for the action-packed aspect of it all. So essentially, yeah, it's kind of an invasion story. These aliens are looking for Superman this whole time. And bang, they're just taking very serious measures to find him, even threatening the entire world. This man, all he has to do is give himself up and yeah, they'll leave the world alone, so they say. But yeah, it really does sell that atmosphere that, yeah, this is a serious major event. And like I said, the choice of panels, the kind of work that Shane and JMS planned out or structured out, I definitely appreciate it. Because, as I said, it flows almost like a film, a motion picture, essentially. But yeah, we get to that, I guess, pivotal moment where he finally begins to don the costume. So here we go. And I like their explanation on the S in this one. You know, every version of Superman tends to have their own logic behind the S, but there's your profile of the character, pretty much stoic in that respect. But I like how they go from showing his incredible power to pretty much getting almost immediately checked. So, bang, the enemy of the story, Terrell. And I love the concept of this character so much. I love the idea behind it, you know, two neighboring worlds or whatnot. It's so well done in the way JMS decided to tell this story. Like, it's pretty compact because these books aren't even that long, each of them, right? So definitely appreciate that, how it gets to the whole origin of the matter and whatnot. But real world consequences, like I mentioned earlier, I love the fact that, you know, nothing is for free in this book. But yeah, basically, by the climax, of course, he learns about adopting his, you know, typical Clark Kent persona and trying to once again get in the doors of the Daily Planet. I just love the whole back and forth. It's believable in this respect instead of just being handed everything. So definitely like the first entry. Very strong in that respect. But Volume 2, which I would more so characterize as like a character piece. This one's probably my favorite of the bunch. So, yeah, it's basically just shortly after the events of the first book. A lot of the books in this series, they're really just following one after the other after the other. But in this case, yeah, Clark, he's just settling in now. He's got his own apartment. He meets very interesting neighbors. You know, he's got Dylan out front with his own problems. You got Lisa LaSalle, LL, as usual. Must be a thing for Clark to be into women like that. And yeah, it's just dealing with, you know, his effects of the heart, but who he is, and more so, like, how can he identify with humanity or protect them if he's not one of them? But, you know, throughout this story, the one thing I definitely appreciate is that you learn he's more human than you realize. He has a lot of human sensibilities. But I do appreciate also how they have this dual plot where, yeah, Lois, she's trying to find out more and more about him because he scooped her on a story. So she's just constantly like trying to investigate. And through this narrative, you get more backstory of Clark, you know, the loner and whatnot. But I'm on this page here because, as mentioned, being more of a character piece, you get to explore a lot of more unique kind of situations like geopolitics. You know, like Superman just showing up in a different nation trying to save the day. And you're realizing, wow, yeah, not everybody wants Superman to come in to their land without, you know, permission or whatever. So I definitely appreciate that they actually delve into this kind of narrative. Very unique, very believable kind of results. And they do kind of set up the parasite in this case, Raymond, to be the, I guess, major antagonist. But I will say this, like, he is pretty one note. They do kind of dress him up as a bad guy, and they really don't try to make you forgive him. So he is pretty one note, exactly as you expect the parasite to be. But yeah, once again, because of this whole burdening relationships that he's developing, like I said, with his neighbor and whatnot, you get more like down to the core of the character, like the heart within this Man of Steel. And I always like this little story he had with this like childhood pet. Very unique. And yeah, just as you see him crying, you can't help but be just like his neighbor. Like, what a great story. But yeah, as the story progresses, I guess they use the parasite more as like kind of a literary foil to kind of get you, or trying to get the reader to understand Superman's perspective. Being powerless now, he's just walking the streets and he's really feeling what it's like to be a human, or even weaker than a human. So he's gaining that new appreciation for how courageous just the average human being is. So definitely appreciate that aspect too. But some of Shane Davis's work here is like phenomenal. So not only does he get the anatomies right, but he even creates that proper menace that Superman can exude. Like, he is this ultra powerful person, but will he actually use it in certain ways? So yeah, this situation of domestic abuse, I love his resolution toward it. You know, he comes off all threatening, but it's like, yep, I'm just going to leave you here in the snow. Find your way home. That's your penance, essentially. But definitely appreciated this whole narrative. As I said, probably my favorite of the bunch. I know you heard me say that about the Batman book earlier, but yeah, very striking art from Shane Davis. Now for volume 3, which basically concludes it. There hasn't been a fourth book since. The third book, it really does seem to focus on the world's fears and, you know, sensibilities, because this is where a lot of the events that I mentioned earlier, like going into another nation and trying to affect regimes, it kind of scared the entire world. And so yes, you're going to get the real world the real world consequences to it all. But what's unique about this title is that it's done by a different artist, Ardian Syaf, who actually had to alter his art aesthetic to even match Shane Davis's work. But that's where I mentioned Barbara Ciardo from. Because she's the colorist, it really gives it that sense of consistency throughout all 3 books. So, you know, only if I probably mentioned it would you really pick up that it's a different artist at times. Yeah, Shane Davis Ardian still kind of goes back to his own style now and again, but definitely appreciate the kind of efforts he took. Now, yeah, it just starts off with this funny item where, yeah, he just has a nightmare. He smashes the wall, and he's so quick to fix it. So I just love that little aspect there. But yeah, this is where we're introduced to the Lex Luthor, a very interesting incarnation, where it's actually 2 Lex Luthors, Alexandra and Alex Luthor, man and wife, both super geniuses. And as mentioned, because the world's paranoia of Superman's becoming, you know, more and more severe, they're really just trying to find a way to ever control him or take him down if they ever had to. So yeah, you're kind of discovering this kind of unique banter between Lex and Lex. Ironically, at least Lex Luthor, the one that we all know, he's surprisingly more passive than many other incarnations of the character. But yeah, at least through this one, we set up the antagonist as Zod. Very unique version of him. But I guess it kind of feels cheapened because we've been down this road before. Even though they try to set up at the beginning that Zod isn't as evil as you think, we all kind of know this backstory, so we know what direction it's going. But hey, I can't deny, Ardian Syaf, man, he really showed up to play with the art. And like I mentioned, Barbara, she just helped make this all nice and cohesive. But a very odd point about this book is the world is so quick to accept Zod's plan to stop Superman that they never realize Zod is basically the same thing that they're trying to stop. So I always found that was a weird plot hole when I first read this. And yeah, it does come once again to this very striking moment where, yeah, they have their blows or whatnot, Superman and of course Zod. But Superman's starting to realize, like, humanity wants this to happen. Like, the more and more he's encountering other human beings, the more he's starting to realize they're not willing to help him. So their fears and whatnot are really taking over. And I guess that's kind of the theme. Like, how much are you going to give into fear and do something completely irrational in order to save the day? So probably one of my favorite moments here is when Superman legitimately thinks he's going to die and he just takes somebody's phone just to do something very human. He just wants to hear his mother's voice for the last time. And man, this sense of desperation, it really got to me every time I read this part. But yeah, as the climax will typically go, things are coming back to normal, and probably one of my favorite moments ever, that same plot hole I mentioned earlier. I love how Superman himself literally addresses it with one of the biggest, boldest texts ever. What the hell were you guys thinking? Oh man, this satisfied me for this book immensely. Because, like I said, it's not so much that the story was kind of avoiding that plot hole, it's that it was probably setting it up for this entire speech in this entire narrative. And yeah, it's just an excellent way to cap off the Earth One series. Personally, they've all been kind of limited with 3 volumes. I mean, this was 2015 after all. They haven't made a fourth one or anything, and I'm kind of hoping it stays that way. It keeps them nice and contained. But all in all three books, very strong titles, that's definitely for sure. But hey, it's not so much about me at this point. Hopefully you guys have come across these books yourselves. Maybe pick them up in trades or whatnot. But either way, wouldn't mind hearing your comments down below just the same. Y'all folks take care and enjoy the rest of your day.